A gunshot echoed across the arid plains of Utah Territory, sending a flock of startled birds into the cloudless sky as Abigail Grantham's horse reared in terror. The normally gentle Palomino bucked wildly, throwing its rider from the saddle with such force that Abigail felt the world spin around her before she crashed against the unforgiving earth of the summer-baked trail leading to Parowan. The year was 1878, and the 22-year-old schoolteacher had been making her weekly journey from the neighboring homestead where she boarded to collect supplies for her small schoolhouse. Now she lay in the dust, the searing pain in her back making it impossible to move as her horse galloped away toward town, its saddlebag still heavy with books she'd ordered from Salt Lake City. "Help," Abigail called, her voice barely audible even to her own ears as dust settled around her. The pain radiated from her lower back, and panic rose in her throat as she realized she couldn't feel her legs. "Please, someone help me." The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her heart race with hope. Squinting against the harsh sunlight, Abigail made out the silhouette of her rider against the vast blue sky. The man dismounted in one fluid motion, his tall frame blocking the sun as he crouched beside her. "Don't move, miss," came a deep, steady voice. "You took quite a fall." Through tears of pain, Abigail looked up into the concerned face of a man she'd seen, but never spoken to the new cattle rancher who'd purchased the old Mackenzie property. His dark blonde hair fell across his forehead, and his blue eyes studied her with genuine concern. "I can't move my legs," Abigail whispered, terror evident in her voice. The stranger's brow furrowed as he carefully examined her without touching her. "My name's August Laramie. I've got a ranch south of town. That shot must have spooked your horse something fierce." "Abigail Grantham," she managed. "I teach at the schoolhouse in Parowan." August nodded. "Miss Grantham, I need to get you to Doc Wilson in town. I'm going to have to move you, and it might hurt, but leaving you out here isn't an option." Abigail nodded, biting her lip as August slid his arms beneath her with extraordinary gentleness. Still, a cry escaped her as he lifted her, cradling her against his chest. "I'm sorry," he murmured, his voice low with genuine regret at causing her pain. "Not your fault," she gasped. "The hunters. They shouldn't be shooting so close to the trail." August's jaw tightened as he whistled for his horse, a sturdy bay that trotted over obediently. With remarkable skill, he managed to mount while still holding Abigail securely. "I've got you," he assured her as he settled her across his lap, her head resting against his shoulder. "Town's only 3 miles. We'll be there before you know it." As they rode toward Parowan, Abigail slipped in and out of consciousness, the pain overwhelming her senses. During her lucid moments, she became acutely aware of the strength in August's arms as he held her steady, the clean scent of his cotton shirt, and the gentle way he spoke to both her and his horse. "Stay with me, Miss Grantham," he encouraged whenever her eyes would flutter. "Tell me about your students. How many children do you teach?" It was a clever tactic, Abigail realized dimly, to keep her conscious and talking. 17, she replied, her voice strained. "Ages 6 to 16, brightest children in Utah Territory." "I bet they are, with you teaching them," August said, and though the pain made it difficult to focus, Abigail could hear the smile in his voice. By the time they reached the outskirts of Parowan, word had already spread of the schoolteacher's accident. August's steady pace had drawn the attention of Seth Cooper, who'd been checking his fence line and had ridden ahead to alert Dr. Wilson. As they rode down Main Street, Abigail, despite her pain, felt a flush of embarrassment at being carried into town in a stranger's arms. The citizens of Parowan were already gathering, concern etched on their faces. Dr. Wilson stood waiting at the door of his office, his sleeves already rolled up. "Bring her in, Mr. Laramie," he called, gesturing toward the examination room. August carried Abigail inside, laying her carefully on the doctor's table. "She says she can't feel her legs," he informed Wilson, his voice low with worry. "Horse threw her after a gunshot spooked it. Thank you for bringing her in, doctor." Wilson said, already examining Abigail with gentle, practiced hands. "You can wait outside now." To Abigail's surprise, August hesitated. "I'll be right outside if you need anything, Miss Grantham," he said, his eyes meeting hers with unexpected intensity before he stepped out. "Doctor." Wilson's examination was thorough and at times painful. After what seemed like hours but was likely only 20 minutes, he gave Abigail a reassuring smile. "Your spine isn't broken, Miss Grantham. The fall bruised your back severely and the shock has temporarily affected your legs, but I believe with proper rest, you'll regain full movement." Relief washed over Abigail like a cool breeze. "How long?" she asked. "A few days, perhaps a week before you can stand, and you'll need to take it easy for several weeks after that. No riding, no teaching." Abigail's heart sank. "But my students will have to make do without you for a time," Dr. Wilson said firmly. "Now we need to find you a place to recover. The boarding house has no ground floor rooms and you won't be managing stairs." At that moment, Mrs. Helen Timmins, who ran the general store with her husband, stepped into the room. "I've been thinking on that, Doctor. Our spare room's been sitting empty since our Ruth married." "She's welcome to it." "That's very kind, Mrs. Timmins," Abigail began, "but I couldn't impose—" "Nonsense," Mrs. Timmins interrupted. "You need looking after and the store's right on Main Street, convenient for everyone." Dr. Wilson nodded approvingly. "Perfect solution. I'll make arrangements to have her moved there this evening." When August was allowed back in, the doctor explained the situation. To Abigail's surprise, the rancher immediately offered, "I can take her to the Timmins place now, if that suits everyone." And so, for the second time that day, Abigail found herself being carried in August Laramie's strong arms. This time through the curious gazes of the townspeople to the Timmins General Store and the small but comfortable room behind it. Mrs. Timmins had already hurried ahead to prepare the space, and when August carried Abigail in, the bed was turned down and a pitcher of fresh water sat on the nightstand. "You just rest easy now," August said as he carefully set her down on the bed. "Doctor says you'll be right as rain before long." Abigail looked up at him, properly seeing him for the first time without the haze of pain clouding her vision. He was handsome in a rugged way, with laugh lines around his eyes despite his serious expression. "How can I thank you, Mr. Laramie?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "No need for thanks. Anyone would have done the same." "Not anyone could have carried me all that way," Abigail said with a small smile. A hint of color touched August's cheeks. "Well, it helps to have hauled my share of calves." He cleared his throat. "I should let you rest." "Good evening, Miss Grantham." After he left, Mrs. Timmins bustled in with a tray of tea and toast. "That August Laramie's a fine man," she commented as she helped Abigail into a sitting position. "Been in these parts almost a year now, keeping mostly to himself and that ranch of his. First time I've seen him in town for anything other than supplies." Abigail sipped the tea gratefully. "I've seen him at church sometimes," she recalled, "but we've never spoken until today." "Well, Providence works in mysterious ways, Mrs. Timmins said with a knowing smile that made Abigail blush. The next morning, Abigail woke to a strange sensation in her legs, pins and needles rather than nothing at all. Her excitement at this development was tempered by the still excruciating pain in her back when she tried to move. Mrs. Timmins helped her wash and change into a borrowed nightgown, then brought breakfast and news. "Your students sent these," she said, placing a bundle of handmade cards on the bed. "And Mr. Parker says not to worry, he'll find a temporary teacher until you're well." Abigail felt a pang of guilt at the thought of her classroom sitting empty. "The books in my saddlebags already retrieved," Mrs. Timmins assured her. "Your horse came back to town on his own, and Mr. Cooper brought your things by last night, after breakfast, Doctor." Wilson came to check on her, pleased with the returning sensation in her legs. "Still, you won't be walking for several days at least," he cautioned. "And you'll need help getting around for weeks after that." As the doctor was leaving, Abigail heard a familiar deep voice in the store. A few minutes later, Mrs. Timmins appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Laramie's here to see how you're faring. Are you up for a visitor?" Abigail hastily smoothed her hair, suddenly conscious of her appearance. "Yes, of course." August entered the room carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers. "Good morning, Miss Grantham. Thought these might brighten up the room." "They're beautiful, thank you," Abigail said, genuinely touched by the gesture. Mrs. Timmons took the flowers. "I'll put these in water. You two chat while I mind the store." Once they were alone, August pulled a chair beside the bed, his hat in his hands. "How are you feeling today?" "Better," Abigail said. "I can feel my legs again, though Dr. Wilson says I won't be walking for a while." August nodded, his relief evident. "That's good news. I was worried." "You needn't have been," Abigail assured him. "Thanks to you, I got help quickly." "I'm just glad I was riding that way," August said. "Was coming to town for supplies when I heard the shot and then saw your horse running riderless." They fell into surprisingly easy conversation. August asked about her teaching, and Abigail found herself describing her 17 students with fondness and humor. In turn, she learned that August had come to Utah Territory from Wyoming after inheriting money from his uncle, determined to build his own cattle operation away from the increasingly crowded ranges further east. "Never thought I'd end up in Mormon country," he admitted with a smile. "But the land was good, the price was right, and folks have been welcoming enough despite me not sharing their faith." "Parowan's a good community," Abigail agreed. "They took me in readily enough when I arrived from Salt Lake City last year, even though I'm not much of a cook or seamstress, skills most value in a woman." August's eyes crinkled with amusement. "But you can quote Shakespeare and cipher numbers, which seems more useful in a schoolteacher." "Precisely my thinking," Abigail said, laughing for the first time since her accident. August stayed for nearly an hour before reluctantly standing. "I should let you rest. Is there anything you need from your boarding house?" "Mrs. Timmons already sent for my things, but thank you." At the door, August hesitated. "Would it be all right if I called again tomorrow? Maybe bring you something to read?" The warmth that spread through Abigail had nothing to do with her injuries. "I'd like that very much, Mr. Laramie." "August," he corrected with a smile. "After all, I did carry you 3 miles." "August," she agreed. "And I'm Abigail." True to his word, August returned the next day with 2 books from his personal collection, a volume of Tennyson's poetry and a well-worn copy of The Last of the Mohicans. "Not sure what you prefer," he said almost shyly. "These were my mother's favorites." Abigail traced the embossed cover of the Tennyson. "She had excellent taste." "She was a schoolteacher, too, back in Pennsylvania," August said, settling into what was becoming his usual chair. "Taught me to read before I ever set foot in a schoolhouse." "Is she still in Pennsylvania?" Abigail asked. A shadow crossed August's face. "No, she passed on when I was 16. Influenza took both my parents within a week of each other." "I'm so sorry," Abigail said softly, understanding the loss. "My father died when I was 12. My mother raised my brother and me alone until she remarried 3 years ago." Their shared experiences of loss created a bridge between them, and as the days passed, August's visits became the highlight of Abigail's slow recovery. He came every afternoon, sometimes bringing small gifts, a jar of honey from his hives, wildflowers from the prairie, or news from around town. A week after her accident, Abigail was able to stand with assistance, though walking remained painful and difficult. August happened to be visiting when she took her first steps with Mrs. Timmons' help. "Look at you," he said, his face lighting up with genuine joy. "You'll be dancing before you know it." "Dancing might be a bit ambitious," Abigail laughed, wincing as she lowered herself back to the bed, "but I'd settle for walking to the schoolhouse." "One step at a time," August advised, and the concern in his eyes made Abigail's heart flutter in a way that had nothing to do with exertion. As the second week of her recovery began, Abigail was finally able to sit in a chair by the window, watching the comings and goings of Parowan's Main Street. She observed August arriving one afternoon, stopping to chat with several townspeople before entering the store. She realized that in the short time since her accident, he'd become a familiar figure in town, no longer the solitary rancher who kept to himself. "Your Mr. Laramie's becoming quite popular," Mrs. Timmons commented as she brought Abigail a cup of tea. "Sarah Jenkins was just in the store asking all sorts of questions about him." "He's hardly my Mr. Laramie," Abigail protested, though the thought of Sarah Jenkins, the pretty young widow who ran the town's small hotel, taking an interest in August, caused an unexpected pang of jealousy. Mrs. Timmons just smiled knowingly. "If you say so, dear." When August arrived, bearing a small basket of early summer strawberries, Abigail found herself studying him more carefully. He'd trimmed his hair and beard, and his shirt looked newer than his usual work clothes. "You're looking well today," she commented. "Special occasion." August ran a hand through his hair self-consciously. "Thought I'd clean up a bit, been looking like a wild man since spring roundup." "It suits you," Abigail said, then busied herself with the strawberries to hide her blush. They spent the afternoon playing checkers, a game at which Abigail proved surprisingly skilled. "You've been letting me win," August accused after his third consecutive defeat. "Not at all," Abigail laughed. "I simply have a strategic mind." "Remind me never to play poker with you," August grumbled good-naturedly. As he was preparing to leave, August seemed uncharacteristically nervous. "There's a social at the church this Saturday," he said, twisting his hat in his hands. "Dr. Wilson says you're well enough to go if someone helps you. I thought maybe. That is, if you'd like, I could escort you." Abigail's heart leapt. "I'd like that very much." The smile that spread across August's face was worth all the pain of the past 2 weeks. "I'll come by with the buggy at 6 then." After he left, Abigail realized with dismay that she had nothing suitable to wear that she could manage with her limited mobility. Mrs. Timmons, ever observant, came to her rescue. "I've been thinking about that," she said when Abigail confided her concern. "My daughter Ruth left some dresses that might fit you with a bit of alteration, and they button up the front, which would be easier for you to manage." By Saturday, Abigail had a lovely blue dress altered to fit her slender frame, and Mrs. Timmons helped arrange her hair in a becoming style with ribbons that matched the dress. "You look beautiful, dear," Mrs. Timmons said, stepping back to admire her handiwork. "That August Laramie won't know what hit him." True to Mrs. Timmons' prediction, when August arrived promptly at 6, he stood speechless for a moment at the sight of Abigail. "You look." He started, then shook his head as if words failed him. "Like a vision," he finally managed. August himself was dressed in his Sunday best, his usually windswept hair tamed and his boots polished to a shine. He offered Abigail his arm, supporting her carefully as they made their way to his waiting buggy. The church social was Parowan's first major gathering of the summer, and the meeting hall was decorated with wildflowers and paper lanterns. As August helped Abigail inside, she was touched by how many people came to greet her, expressing relief at her recovery. "You're quite beloved in this town," August observed as they found seats at one of the tables. "They're good people," Abigail said. "I've felt at home here since the day I arrived." The evening was filled with music, food, and conversation. Despite her still tender back, Abigail found herself enjoying the festivities immensely, especially with August's attentive presence beside her. He fetched her food, introduced her to ranchers she hadn't yet met, and generally ensured her comfort without making her feel like an invalid. As the musicians struck up a waltz, Abigail watched the couples take to the dance floor with a wistful expression. "Maybe at the next social," August said, noticing her longing. "I'll hold you to that," Abigail replied, meeting his gaze with a warmth that made his eyes darken. The moment was interrupted by Sarah Jenkins, who approached their table with a determined smile. "Mr. Laramie, I was hoping you might partner me for this dance. Miss Grantham won't mind, I'm sure." Before August could respond, Abigail squeezed his hand. "Of course not. You should dance, August." Though he looked reluctant, August was too polite to refuse. As he led Sarah to the dance floor, Abigail tried to ignore the twist of jealousy in her stomach, especially when she saw how well they moved together, Sarah laughing up at something August said. "He's a good man, that August Laramie," came a voice beside her. Abigail turned to find Reverend Phillips sitting down next to her, "Been impressed with how he stepped up to help you." "Yes, he's been very kind," Abigail agreed. "More than kind, I'd say," the Reverend observed with a knowing smile. "Not many men would visit a lady every day for 2 weeks running just out of kindness." Abigail felt her cheeks warm. "We've become friends." "Friends is a good place to start," Reverend Phillips nodded. "The best marriages I've seen began as friendships." Before Abigail could respond to this rather forward observation, August returned, looking relieved to be back at their table. "Reverend," he greeted with a respectful nod. "Mr. Laramie, I was just telling Miss Grantham how pleased we all are with her recovery," the Reverend said, rising. "You two enjoy the evening." With a meaningful glance between them, he moved on to another table. "Sarah Jenkins is quite a dancer," Abigail commented, striving for a casual tone. August shrugged. "She's nice enough, but talks more than she listens." He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "And she doesn't know the first thing about Tennyson." The simple comment, delivered with a warm smile meant only for her, dissolved Abigail's jealousy instantly. For the rest of the evening, she found herself increasingly aware of August's presence beside her, the brush of his arm against hers, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, how he seemed to anticipate her needs before she expressed them. As the social wound down, August carefully helped Abigail back to his buggy for the short ride to the Timmins store. The night air had cooled and he wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, his hands lingering a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for inviting me tonight," Abigail said as they drove through the quiet streets. "It was wonderful to be out among people again." "Thank you for accepting," August replied. "It wouldn't have been half as enjoyable without your company." When they reached the Timmins store, August insisted on helping Abigail inside despite her protests that she could manage. At her door, he hesitated, seeming to struggle with something. "Would it be too forward," he finally asked, "if I requested permission to call on you properly? Not just as a friend checking on your recovery, but with intentions?" Abigail's heart soared at the sincerity in his voice. "Not too forward at all," she answered softly. "In fact, I'd be disappointed if you didn't." The smile that illuminated August's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Gently, he took her hand and raised it to his lips. "Good night, Abigail. I'll see you tomorrow." "Good night, August," she whispered, watching as he stepped back, tipped his hat, and returned to his buggy. Inside her room, Abigail sank onto the bed, her back aching from the evening's activities but her heart too full to care. For the first time since her accident, she found herself thinking that perhaps being thrown from her horse had been a blessing in disguise. The following weeks saw a transformation in Abigail's life. Her recovery progressed steadily under Dr. Wilson's care, and by the end of June, she was able to walk short distances without assistance, though a cane remained necessary for longer journeys. Throughout this time, August's courtship continued with a mixture of old-fashioned propriety and genuine affection that endeared him not only to Abigail but to the entire town. He brought her books from his own collection and ordered others from Salt Lake City when she expressed interest in a particular subject. He escorted her to church on Sundays and to dinner at the homes of various Parowan residents who had taken it upon themselves to facilitate the budding romance. By mid-July, Abigail was strong enough to return to her teaching duties, though she now rented a small house near the schoolhouse instead of returning to the more distant boarding house. August helped her move, building shelves for her books and ensuring the house was comfortable and secure. "I don't like to think of you living here alone," he admitted as he fixed a loose hinge on her front door one evening. "I've lived alone before," Abigail reminded him with a smile, "and I'm hardly isolated with the Coopers next door and the schoolhouse just down the path." "Still," August said, his expression serious as he set down his tools and took her hands in his, "I worry about you." The tenderness in his voice made Abigail's breath catch. Over the past weeks, their relationship had deepened, but August had been careful to maintain a respectful distance, never taking liberties beyond occasionally holding her hand or offering his arm for support. "August," Abigail said softly, gathering her courage, "why haven't you kissed me yet?" His eyes widened in surprise, then darkened with an emotion that sent a thrill through her. "Because," he said, his voice husky, "once I start, I fear I won't want to stop, and I respect you too much to risk your reputation." "My reputation is safe with you," Abigail whispered. "And I find myself thinking of little else these days." August's hands tightened around hers. Slowly, giving her every chance to withdraw, he leaned forward until his lips met hers in a kiss so gentle it brought tears to her eyes. When he began to pull away, Abigail surprised herself by raising a hand to his cheek, holding him close as she returned the kiss with newfound boldness. When they finally parted, August rested his forehead against hers, his breathing unsteady. "I've been wanting to do that since the church social," he confessed. "I've been wanting you to do that since you carried me into town," Abigail admitted with a small laugh. August smiled, touching her cheek with a reverence that made her heart ache. "I think I started falling in love with you that very day," he said. "Even with you half-conscious and me terrified you might be gravely injured, something about holding you felt right." The simple declaration, delivered with such honest emotion, was more powerful than any flowery profession could have been. "I love you too, August," Abigail whispered, the words feeling both momentous and completely natural. That evening marked a turning point in their relationship. Though August remained respectful of propriety, always visiting during daylight hours and never staying inappropriately late, there was a new intimacy between them, an unspoken acknowledgement of their feelings and intentions. As summer turned to autumn, Abigail's recovery continued to progress, and by October she had discarded her cane entirely, though she still experienced occasional pain after particularly active days. August was attentive to these moments, quick to notice when she was tiring and insistent that she take care of herself. "You'll be no good to those children if you push yourself back into bed rest," he scolded gently one afternoon when he found her grading papers despite obvious discomfort. "Says the man who worked through a broken arm last month," Abigail retorted, though she allowed him to guide her to the more comfortable chair by the stove. "Do as I say, not as I do," August grinned, kneeling to place a cushion behind her back. The position, with him on one knee before her, struck them both at the same moment. "This isn't how I planned it," August said after a pause, his expression suddenly serious. "I have a ring at home, and I thought perhaps after Sunday service with the mountains showing their fall colors." Abigail's heart began to race. "August, but now I find I can't wait another day," he continued, taking her hands in his. "Abigail Grantham, these past months have been the happiest of my life. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears sprang to Abigail's eyes as she squeezed his hands. "Yes," she said simply. "With all my heart, yes." The joy that spread across August's face was like watching the sun break through storm clouds. He rose, pulling her gently to her feet and into his arms. "I promise to spend every day making you happy," he whispered before claiming her lips in a kiss that sealed their commitment. Though August insisted on properly proposing again that Sunday with the ring, a delicate gold band set with a small diamond that had belonged to his grandmother, news of their engagement spread through Parowan like wildfire. The town's reaction was universally supportive, with many claiming they had predicted the match from the day August carried Abigail into town. "Never seen a clearer case of providence," Reverend Phillips declared when they approached him about performing the ceremony. "When would you like to be married?" They decided on a December wedding, giving them time to prepare while still becoming husband and wife before the harsh winter fully set in. August threw himself into expanding his ranch house, adding a proper parlor and a larger kitchen to make it suitable for a schoolteacher bride. Abigail, meanwhile, found herself overwhelmed by the generosity of Parowan's citizens. Women arrived at her small house bearing quilts, linens, and dishes. Men offered furniture and practical advice for ranch living. Mrs. Timmons organized a sewing circle to help create Abigail's wedding dress, while Mr. Timmons quietly arranged to have a proper bookcase built as a wedding gift. "You've touched many lives here," August observed as they sorted through yet another delivery of wedding presents one evening. "These people love you. They're showing the same kindness to you," Abigail pointed out. "Mr. Cooper and his sons helped build your new barn, and Reverend Phillips spent 2 days helping you dig the new well." August nodded thoughtfully. "When I bought that ranch, I thought I was choosing solitude, never expected to find a community. Or you." As their wedding approached, winter descended on Parowan with a series of early snowstorms. 3 days before the ceremony, a particularly heavy snowfall threatened to make travel impossible for some of the more distant ranchers who planned to attend. August arrived at Abigail's house that morning looking worried. "Road to Salt Lake City's closed," he reported. "The judge won't make it for the circuit court tomorrow, which means no marriage license." Abigail's heart sank. Without the license, Reverend Phillips couldn't legally marry them. "Could we postpone?" August took her hands, his expression determined. "I don't want to wait, not even a week, but I had another thought. Judge Parker in Cedar City might still be accessible. It's a hard ride in this weather, but I could make it there and back by tomorrow night if I leave now." "August, that's 30 miles each way in snow," Abigail protested. "It's too dangerous." "I've ridden in worse," he assured her, "and I'd ride through a blizzard to make you my wife on Saturday." Despite her concerns, Abigail knew that look of determination. "Promise me you'll be careful," she insisted. "I'd rather postpone the wedding than lose you to foolhardiness." August kissed her thoroughly. "I promise, nothing's going to keep me from marrying you this Saturday." True to his word, August returned late the following night, exhausted but triumphant, the precious marriage license secured in his saddlebags. The entire town seemed to release a collective breath of relief, and wedding preparations continued with renewed enthusiasm. On Saturday, December 15, 1878, the Parowan church was filled to capacity despite the snow-covered roads. Abigail stood in the small antechamber, her white dress with its high collar and delicate lace overlay making her look, according to Mrs. Timmons, like an angel come down to bless our little town. "Your mother would be so proud," Mrs. Timmons said, adjusting Abigail's veil one last time. "Are you ready, dear?" Abigail nodded, her heart too full for words. As the church doors opened and she began her walk down the aisle on Mr. Timmons' arm, he having volunteered to give her away in her father's absence, she saw August waiting for her, his expression one of such reverent joy that tears pricked her eyes. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of emotion. Abigail would later remember fragments: the warmth of August's hands holding hers, the slight tremor in his voice as he recited his vows, the cheers that erupted when Reverend Phillips pronounced them husband and wife, and the tender kiss that August placed on her lips, sealing their union before God and community. The celebration afterward at the town hall was joyous and prolonged, with food contributed by every household in Parowan and music provided by local talent. August and Abigail danced their first dance as a married couple to Beautiful Dreamer, moving together as if they'd been partners for years rather than months. "Are you happy, Mrs. Laramie?" August whispered as they swayed together. The name, her new name, sent a thrill through Abigail. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," she replied truthfully. "And you, Mr. Laramie?" "I'm holding my entire world in my arms," he answered, his voice husky with emotion. "What more could any man ask for?" As the celebration continued around them, Abigail reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. A spooked horse, a painful fall, and a stranger's kindness had set her on a path she could never have anticipated when she'd set out on that summer day. Later that night, August drove his new bride home to their ranch in a sleigh he'd decorated with evergreen boughs and lanterns. The moonlight on the snow transformed the familiar landscape into something magical, and Abigail nestled against her husband's side, wrapped in furs against the cold. "Welcome home, Abigail," August said as they approached the ranch house, its windows glowing with warmth against the winter night. Inside, August had prepared a special surprise. The parlor was decorated with wildflowers he'd had dried and preserved from the summer meadows, and a small table was set with their wedding china and a bottle of wine he'd ordered specially from Salt Lake City. "It's beautiful," Abigail breathed, touched by his thoughtfulness. "Not half as beautiful as you," August replied, helping her remove her heavy coat and drawing her into his arms. "I still can't quite believe you're my wife." Their first night together as husband and wife was everything Abigail had dreamed of: tender, passionate, and filled with discoveries, as they learned each other in this new way. August was gentle with her still occasionally troublesome back, and in his care, Abigail found a physical joy that matched the emotional connection they'd built over the preceding months. As winter settled fully over Utah territory, the Laramies established their life together with a happiness that seemed to radiate outward, touching everyone around them. August drove Abigail to the schoolhouse each morning when weather permitted and collected her each afternoon. On stormy days when travel was impossible, they remained contentedly snowbound, reading aloud to each other by the fire or working together on household projects. By spring, Abigail had fully recovered from her accident, though occasional twinges in damp weather served as reminders of that fateful day. She had also adapted remarkably well to ranch life, surprising August with her willingness to learn everything from cooking on a wood stove to helping with the spring calves. "Never thought I'd see a schoolteacher so unafraid to get her hands dirty," he commented one evening as they washed up after a day of branding. "Never thought I'd be married to a cattle rancher," Abigail countered with a smile. "Life has a way of surprising us." Their first anniversary was celebrated quietly at home, with August presenting Abigail with a gift he'd been working on in secret for months, a rocking chair carved by his own hands, with her initials and their wedding date worked into the design. "For when you need to rest your back," he explained, suddenly shy about his craftsmanship, "and perhaps someday for rocking our children." Abigail's eyes filled with tears as she ran her hands over the smooth wood. "It's perfect," she whispered, looking up at him with love, "and as for children, I have something to tell you." August's expression shifted from confusion to wonder as Abigail took his hand and placed it against her still flat stomach. "Really?" he breathed, his voice cracking with emotion. Abigail nodded, her own joy reflected in his shining eyes. "Doctor Wilson confirmed it yesterday. We're going to have a baby in the fall." August gathered her into his arms with a whoop of delight, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around before suddenly setting her down with a look of concern. "Your back I shouldn't have is perfectly fine," Abigail laughed, pulling him back into an embrace. "I'm not made of glass, August." "No," he agreed, kissing her forehead tenderly. "You're made of something much stronger. I've known that since the day I found you on that trail." The months of Abigail's pregnancy passed with August growing increasingly protective, much to her amused exasperation. By summer, her condition was obvious, and her students were fascinated by their teacher's expanding waistline. "Mrs. Cooper says you've got a baby in your belly," 6-year-old Emma Reynolds announced one day during arithmetic lessons, causing the older children to giggle and Abigail to struggle to maintain her composure. "Mrs. Cooper is correct," Abigail replied calmly. "Mr. Laramie and I are expecting a baby in October. Now back to our multiplication tables." As her due date approached, Abigail reluctantly took leave from teaching, with a young woman from Cedar City hired as her temporary replacement. August insisted on having Mrs. Timmons come stay at the ranch for the final weeks, not willing to risk Abigail being alone while he tended to necessary ranch work. On a crisp October morning, almost exactly 2 years after August had proposed, Abigail went into labor. The birth was long and difficult, with Dr. Wilson being fetched from town and August pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door, barred from entry by Mrs. Timmons' firm instructions. "Men are no use at times like these," she declared, shutting the door in his face. After 14 hours, as dawn was breaking over the mountains, Alexander Timothy Laramie entered the world with a robust cry that could be heard throughout the house. When August was finally allowed into the bedroom, he found Abigail exhausted but radiant, their son cradled in her arms. "He has your eyes," she said softly as August perched carefully on the edge of the bed, staring in wonder at the tiny face peering up at him. "And your stubborn determination," August replied, his voice thick with emotion as he reached out to touch his son's tiny fist. 14 hours to get here." "Worth every minute," Abigail whispered, leaning into her husband's embrace as they marveled together at the new life they had created. The years that followed brought both joys and challenges to the Laramies. Alexander, or Alex as he came to be called, was joined by a sister, Emily Rose, 2 years later, and another brother, William James, 3 years after that. The ranch prospered under August's careful management, expanding to include more land and a growing herd of quality cattle. Abigail returned to teaching after Alex's birth, but eventually resigned her position when Emily arrived, finding that managing 3 young children and a growing ranch demanded her full attention. Instead, she began holding informal classes at the ranch for her own children and those of neighboring ranchers who lived too far from town to attend the Parowan school regularly. You never can stop being a teacher, can you? August teased one evening as he found her surrounded by children in their expanded parlor, all absorbed in a lesson about ancient Rome. "Would you want me to?" Abigail challenged with a smile. "Not for all the cattle in Utah Territory," August assured her, dropping a kiss on her head as he passed. In 1890, when Alex was 12, Emily 10, and William 7, Abigail and August celebrated their 12th wedding anniversary with a surprise party organized by their children and the still devoted citizens of Parowan. Standing in the town hall, surrounded by friends who had become family, Abigail found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. "What are you thinking about?" August asked, coming to stand beside her as they watched their children playing with the other young people of the town. "I was thinking about horses," Abigail replied with a smile. August raised an eyebrow in question. "Specifically about being thrown from one," she clarified. "And about a handsome cowboy who carried me to town in his arms." August's eyes softened with understanding. "Best day of my life finding you on that trail," he said, taking her hand and raising it to his lips. "Though I still wish you hadn't been hurt." "I don't," Abigail said thoughtfully. "Because without that fall, we might have continued passing each other in town with polite nods, never knowing what we could mean to each other. Sometimes, August, what seems like our worst moment can lead us to our greatest happiness." August drew her into his arms, still as strong and steady as they had been on that summer day 12 years earlier. "Then here's to falling horses," he murmured against her hair, "and the angels they throw in a man's path." As they moved together to the music, surrounded by the life they had built, Abigail silently thanked the twist of fate that had brought her to this moment, from a painful fall on a dusty trail to the enduring joy of a love born when a cowboy carried her to town in his arms.